And then a little bit about what our issues are going forward into next year, just because I know people are hearing a lot of things, and I'll wait for questions if you want me to dispel any rumors or questions that you have. So not a problem with that. All right, Trish, I am going to bet 50 cents that Fitz might bust in at any and I will be happy about that. So
yeah,
let me know when you need me to advance slides.
Yeah, I think that we can go ahead and advance slides a little bit here. Fitz is my new puppy. It's actually, I have the big puppy and the big dog. Goose is the one that might show up, and I said his name, which was a really big mistake. But there he is. He's okay. I'm going to focus. So yeah, I'm super excited to be here, and I'm really excited. The more and more and more time I spend in Shoreline, and the more time I get to be in classrooms and see our amazing educators at work, the more proud I am. So I can't take an opportunity to not say how happy I am when I am at the IEP table and I hear educators, and I see some of them are here in this meeting right now. I think we have Kathy and Kelly and Hannah. There might be a few others that I'm missing. These guys are fantastic, like some of the best educators I've seen. And some of these guys are, I think Hannah, you might be in the middle school. That Hannah's face is definitely not scary. So I think middle school is going to work out just fine because we have so many amazing teachers ready to welcome them. But that's not what we're here to talk about, but I can't help myself. So I first want to just talk a little bit about, we all know that special education, right, is about getting a free and appropriate education for all of our students, and that each IEP is designed to meet the student's individual needs. We are in, and IDEA mandates that we do so. That's the federal law that oversees special education. So regardless of budget, regardless of any other circumstance, regardless of COVID or pandemics, we need to provide a free and appropriate education to every student. So that gives me a little bit of, I mean, I'm concerned about the budget things happening and all of that, but I also know that at the end of the day, our students with disabilities are going to receive their services based on what their IEP says. Now, do we get it right every time? Absolutely not. Do we have some problems every once in a while? Sure. But we also have some, but we know that that's what we're needing to do, that is our mandate. All right, next one. And so I wanted to kind of share I have to move the little pictures here. There we go. Okay, so this is the students eligible for special education and their services. The federal, state, and district requirements are that we provide the legally mandated services, that they must be timely, and that they support meaningful progress on IEP goals, and that we also must provide ESY services based on IEP team's decision for those services. And we need to provide equitable services for private school students as well. So those are students that are in our local private schools. If they are eligible for special education services, then we need to ensure that we have services for them as well. So one of the things that's interesting is that bullet 2 must provide compliant, timely, and services. That's for us to put forward. We have to put forward a monthly count of students that we're serving, and that's how our funds are determined, based on how many special education students that we have that have on-time IEPs. So the great news about Shoreline is that our special education teams really take that seriously and get IEPs in on time, and that they are timely. So that is fantastic. We do really well with that mandate. And then how we use our funds in Shoreline is with staff salaries. Then we pay for our executive director. This is our internal office. We have a budget administrative support person that helps with the budget and contracts. And then we have some TOSAs, which are like our special ed coordinator, student support services coordinator, a compliance specialist. And I missed up top our ESA professionals, OTs, PTs, SLPs, psychologists, paraeducators, audiologists, teachers of the visually impaired, all of those folks that are out there doing those important services for students. Based on what their IEP says, they're funded through the funds that we receive through the state and the federal dollars. And then we have those equitable services for students in private schools, ESY, and also equipment, any type of equipment that is needed for a student to have access to their services. We also purchase that. So assistive technology, things like an iPad, or some of our students have what's called an AAC device that helps with communication, and any other materials. Okay, and then, okay, so this is a little bit about where our students are placed and how many students we have served. We have approximately 1,200. Yes, I thought for a minute I said 12,000. That would have been a lot. 1,200 students receiving special education services. That preschool number definitely fluctuates a little bit due to Child Find. I bet you Hillary knows that number off the top of her head, but that 76 is probably not accurate right now. And then you can see about 512 in elementary, 224 in middle, and then 330 in high school. So that is how our students are served. And then we have those intensive services. And that's that number there, 85, 54, and then 90. So how students are served in Shoreline, we have their programs that have unique names like Blended or ILS. In middle school, they have Stride and Life. So different types of services that are things that we'll be looking at as we move forward with that inclusionary work. And then the single serve, it's not ice cream. It's students that receive like one service. Typically that's communication, but not always. It might be OT or another one service. And then the students that are out of district over there, those are students that are in like either our NPAs. Those are our non-public agencies. So students that are Shoreline students, but are receiving their education in a different location based on their IEP needs. And I think I'm talking too slow or maybe too fast. I don't know. This kind of gives you a little bit of idea of a breakdown of our students. This presentation was put together with the budget advisory team in mind, and some of the information that they were looking to see about who our students are. So if you see here, the yellow and the green or blue, depending on how your eyes see it, are our students that are in free and reduced lunch students that qualify in that area. And of our students with free and reduced lunch, 35.9% also have an IEP. So I will leave that slide and we'll move on to the next one. And then this is how we break down by race and ethnicity in our percentages of students who receive special education services. Gen Ed is the lighter color and special ed is the darker color. And this is something, this PowerPoint we can make available to you if you want to see this for a little bit longer, but I won't go through each of the categories with you, so we can move on and we can get to some questions. All right, so special ed oversight and funding sources. We talked about federal, state, and local levy. Part of when Ananda was reading through that House bill, that was really focusing in on that local levy piece, because we do get dollars from the federal government to support special education. We also get state level dollars to support special education. And then the rest of our money comes to support students with IEPs is from our local levy. It says local level, but I think we mean levy, right, Jennifer?
Sure, your slide.
So you'll see, I think we have like a little pie chart that kind of shows you how much is coming from each of those areas. And one of the concerns is that we are really leaning on that local levy to make sure that we are serving all students. Because like I said, we are serving every IEP. We want to do that because it's the right thing to do for our students, but we also are mandated by law to do that. Okay, so here you go. This is how the dollars come in. The federal dollars, and that's that number up there. And then we get quite a bit more from the state. And then the rest is funded. And the rest is from our local levy. So it's around $8.5 million is coming from our local levy to support special education. That's when we're talking about that fully funding piece, is that we are really relying on our local community to really support and fill the gap of meeting all of the needs that we have for our students in Shoreline. All right, so this kind of shows you like a little bit about our special education staff and how we are, where our teachers are, our paraeducators are, and then we have our behavior techs and then some of our one-on-one paras. So this kind of gives you a snapshot about how we're staffed and the number of teachers and the hours of support staff that we have really serving our students. And this gives you and I a snapshot of our special education specialists. These are the, sometimes we call these folks our ESAs, Educational Service Associates. That's a term unique to Washington State. That is a certification that these folks receive as they're coming in to serve in the school setting versus like a medical setting or a private setting. If you're in a school and you serve in this way, you have that ESA staff. So it kind of shows you a little bit of how much FTE and how many people we have serving in these ways. So this is a lot of those this is kind of an area of both the previous slide and this slide share with you the amount of staff that we have in Shoreline serving our kids.
All right, well, you are now officially off the hook.
I'm done. That's it. I thought I got.
You got more to say?
I always have more to say, but yeah, but no, you're up, Jennifer. You're up.
We'll take it away. Thank you. Okay, so a bit of a general budget update, and then we'll weave in some special education funding along the way. So if you are from a school, you may have seen part of this when Dr. Reyes has been coming out to talk with staff, or will be soon. But the district is in a financial condition that requires some adjustments. We have experienced enrollment loss over the last several years by over 400 students, about 450. To put that into dollars, although I very much hate the sentence that 400 students equal X amount of money, that is the case in this context. So about $1 million per 100 students right now is what we get from the state. So that's a significant funding difference for us when we see students leave our system. Regionalization is a term that was put into place by the legislature in 2018. And it was intended to provide extra dollars to school districts who were in higher cost of living areas so that quality educators could live and work, live where they work where they live, and enjoy being in a community that they are serving or very close to it and not have to be power commuters. So the district received at that time 24% boosted funding from the state. When that law was written, it did tell us that it was going to decline, and it has done so by 2% a year to our current 18% enhancement. That totals about $7 million difference for us. Regionalization is a topic in the legislature this year. I don't know, I couldn't tell you how that's going to end up, but certainly we would struggle if it was less than our current level. It would be nice if it was recognized that certainly living in the I-5 corridor of King County and Snohomish County has not gotten any more cost effective. We also have increased costs, just like you do at home. Our energy costs and our pandemic relief efforts all cost money. So costs were up across the last few years. Those came together to cause a current budget constraints that we have been talking with the board and all staff and the budget advisory team. We are publishing some additional information shortly, and there will be some town halls coming up as well. So there's lots of ways to learn about this and participate. Last spring, we had some revenue projections that were high. I just joined the district in July, so I can't speak excessively to what those assumptions were, but the expenditure plan projections were also low, and those two added together to cause us some trouble when I arrived to get a balanced budget. Our budget has to be prepared and in draft format for our educational services district and the public by July 10th. I started on July 5th, and then we have to adopt the budget by the end of August. So as we worked through that, that resulted in this current fiscal year, which runs through next August, having a projected ending fund balance of just over $1 million. And an ending fund balance is essentially your savings account on a home sort of level. It is about 0.6%. So it is very low. Our school board policy is 4 to 5% unreserved ending fund balance. So we did have to go to our board and ask them to waive their policy to adopt the budget we had. They did so. They did so last year as well. So this has been a situation that we really must work to address now so that we can make sure that our expenditures don't continue to exceed our revenues. Just to put it on a more personal level, because $1 million still sounds like a lot of money to all of us. If you earn $75,000 a year, this would be like finishing your year and putting $450 total in your savings account. So it is not much savings to have in the event of an issue or emergency. Where does our money come from? Our local levy that was approved by our voters, it was about $31 million last year, about $111.2 million from the state, just over 17 from federal sources. And that does include a lot of our special education funding. Almost all of it from the federal government is earmarked for special ed, for other categorical programs run by our friend Ellen Kaye, also some programs run by Hillary. So those three powerful ladies, they take care of a lot of that funding for us. You can see in the graph, though, the federal money is depicted in yellow. It is a small portion, but over 2021 and 21-22, you can see it grew. It went from being maybe 5% to 11, and then in the next year, probably somewhere between 12 and 13. That represents the pandemic relief money that came out of both presidential administrations who were overseeing the pandemic relief. So that, in short, sort of helped hold us harmless from other things that were happening during that time by having those funds intact. And here is a look at where our funding goes. And this includes special education. So all of our certificated and classified salaries, those paraeducators in the classroom and the teachers, as well as their benefits and payroll taxes. Purchased services is another area that is heavily special education. So when Trish mentioned that we have students that need services outside of Shoreline, or if we cannot find a staff person and we need to contract for someone to support a student, it would come out of purchase services there. So that $12 million does represent a portion that is part of our special ed funding. These are required reporting mechanisms from the state. Otherwise, teeny tiny little ones I'd probably leave off, but it's good to know that we don't spend a lot of money on travel or on big purchases under capital outlay. We talked about those pandemic relief funds. Here's how those were spent. The district received between state and federal level about $14 million. All but about 200,000 of that is already spent. A great deal of it went into ensuring that we had new filters and PPE, and we had the Children's Center and food services operating in staff that were being maintained and not let go during this time. And then we also have invested in ensuring that we kept our teaching staff because as our enrollment declined, we did not decline any staffing numbers. We kept everyone all hands on deck to get us through the pandemic, and that would fall into student supervision as well. Okay. So our local levy comprises about 16% of this year's budget. So that $8.5 million that Trish spoke about is about a third of our funding that's from the levy. The local levy can only enhance That's the state's prototypical funding model. So it can pay for things like salaries beyond state allocations. And that's important as we examine the bill that you all voted on tonight. I'm very curious about how that's going to flesh out. Special education costs not fully covered. We put additional supports into classrooms. We have other trainings. We have things that just don't get funded by the state in full. So we use our local levy to make that up. And then you can see this bulleted list of positions that we fulfill a more robust model than what the state provides for us. And some of these are directly connected to our special education students. The state allocates just over 5 nurses for the entire district. At present, we have 1 nurse per school. And 5 that is very difficult for them to manage a caseload of 1,200 students, plus all the other students who might come to the nursing's office for assistance. They only fund less than 1.6 school psychologists. We know that's a necessary staff person to help support students and to get their IEPs and their goals and help them reach for their dreams. So that one always just really stands out to me, that less than 1 for a district of our size. Don't know how that would be possible. So that gives you an idea of some of the things that we're currently paying for out of the local levy. And what interests me about the bill you voted on tonight is it's very catch-all, which is amazing. And it sounds great. And I am sure that the appropriations group in Olympia will start trying to digest that and figure out how to cost it for the legislature. So I'll be very curious if all means all. Because, for example, I try not to pick on anyone, but the state gives us $127,000 for a certificated administrator. So that's your principals, that's Trish, that's me. We'll just point it ourselves here. And $127,000 per administrator is not competitive wage-wise with any of the local districts. So the levy makes up the difference. So I will be very curious as they look to fully fund special education, if they are going to fund as we are currently expending, or what sort of rules or regulations we put around the bumpers on that, I guess. So I'm going to be following this one closely and working with our associations, the Washington School Administrators and the school business officials have advocacy groups, because we can advocate as individuals, but not on district time. So we'll be connected with them so that we can make sure we understand what that bill is actually going to do and mean for us if it's passed. So planning ahead for next year's budget and the impacts that will have. Big caveat on this part of the discussion. We do not usually put out an estimate this early. All of the tools that we have to play in a sandbox and do budget models are not yet prepared by the state. We just saw the governor's budget at the end of, middle of December, and the legislature is just going. But we need to make some assumptions. So we have looked at our enrollment. We continue to see a decline of enrollment in Shoreline. We have 1,200 special education students enrolled. That is not enough for the multiplier adjustments in other bills that the legislature is seeing to help us because we don't hit the cap that they have arbitrarily put into place. So our enrollment loss.
I'm wondering, Jennifer, if you can explain, the multiplier and the cap are things that we talk about in special ed funding a lot. And I'm wondering if we can define that a little bit for these guys. I'm sure some folks know, but we can do that after we're done with the presentation. Sure. But I bet you there's folks that would like to know what those really mean and how they impact.
I'll let you come up with an example while I try and through
okay. These. I'll think about it. I think I know that Mark, for example, Mark was talking about the cap is a certain percentage. And for us to, if the cap, I think goes to I think he utilized the number 13 point something or other. Mm-hmm. And in order for that cap to benefit Shoreline School District, that would mean that we would need to have an additional like 630 or so students eligible for special education receiving services.
Right.
So the cap movement doesn't really impact Shoreline schools.
Right.
Did I get that right?
Yes, that
Okay.
was what I was meaning from, the other bills and the cap
Yeah.
multipliers, and isn't where we need to land. We need to land on understanding that special education has additional costs. There are additional staff in those rooms often to help support these students as they do their work to learn and to grow. And we want to get away from caps and multipliers and things that are really rather limiting for a district like Shoreline. Anyway, so back to my thoughts. We are also subject to whatever the state decides as an implicit price deflator adjustment. A lot of people refer to that as a COLA. The legislature stopped providing COLAs to schools a few years ago and replaced it with an IPD. We don't know what that will be. We know inflation is very high. There's a lot of advocacy on the legislature, considering they currently have a pretty good amount of revenue coming in, that they would fund something that would help teachers and other educators not fall behind. So we have estimated that it could be 6% next year. So here's what this scenario looks like, and we're just going to focus on the far right. We would, with 1% less enrollment and that 6% increase, we would expect to see about 165 million in revenue. We have made very, very, very early forecasting projections that our expenditures would be just under $178 million. And that gives us a net difference, or we'd be overspending what we receive by 12.7 million. That would mean an ending fund balance, or that savings account we talked about, would be negative by just about 12 million at the end of next year, if we get that $1 million ending fund balance this year. So the district cannot operate in the red without additional supports coming in from the state. And I don't mean supports like money. I mean supports like oversight. And local control would be lost temporarily to decision-making that would be made likely in Renton by our Puget Sound ESD that oversees all the districts in this area, as well as OSPI in Olympia. So if Trish needed to hire someone and that was going to be an additional expense, she can't come ask me, she can't go ask Dr. Reyes. She would need to ask this third party for every dollar that we spent. That is a situation that we do not wish to get into. Shoreline has been in this situation, unfortunately, many years ago. It is difficult to function and do the things you want to do for students if you don't have your financial side of the house in order to support that. So we have presented to the board in December. This is what our early estimates were. The board does want us to explore options that would ensure a balanced budget and begin to rebuild that ending fund balance or savings account that we do need to have. $1 million is not even 2 days of operations for the district. We spend about $12.5 million a month in payroll. A lot of times people say, well, you should have a month of payroll at least. It would be super unlikely that we would have to use our savings account to cover a whole month of payroll. So I don't like to suggest that that's within the realm of feasibility, but it does give you a scale of how much money that is to have available. This talks a little bit more about fund balance, but I think I will not bore you too much with that. This shows you our trend across years of what's been happening with our savings account and where we're budgeted to end this year again. What should we be? That's one of the questions I hear a lot. Well, the board's policy is somewhere around here in the $7-8 million range. Again, that is still not a month's payroll if we're going to use that yardstick. The state average is somewhere around 7 to 8% is what districts carry. If you're a big district like Seattle, it's a almost unfathomable amount of money that they have in fund balance. But they too are spending that down this year. Here is our budget cycle, and we are in the winter spring mode. The rhododendron outside my office is already blooming, so I'm calling it spring, even though it's still January. And I'm probably not done waking up at 4 a.m. to hear about snow on the roads yet, but the legislature is underway. We are working on our budget parameters, and we're working with our budget advisory team and our school board, our district leadership team, to try and make sure that we are on a pathway to presenting our school board with a balanced budget with some restored fund balance by that July 10 preliminary deadline. So that is the financial show, and I will stop sharing so that, wait, stop share. You'd think I'd be better at that by now. All right, so now we are excited for all the questions. Bring them on.
And actually, Jennifer, before we get into questions, I want to share some of kind of the PTA angle on advocacy first, because hopefully then that will link and questions can be sort of then actionable. I don't know if that made sense. I'm gonna talk about what I meant to talk about here. Get back to screen sharing. So I really, well, a couple things. I'm really, so PTA is an advocacy organization. I sort of feel like the stereotype or the movie, the Hollywood idea of PTA is like bake sales and school dances, right? But PTA is and was founded to be an advocacy organization for schools. We have a full-time, we have a lobbyist who's hired by PTA who represents us in Olympia. This is really this kind of work, getting the state to understand these issues, talking to our representatives, having them understand these issues, and writing legislation that works for schools is a core function of PTA. And PTA has a ton of tools to do that. And I want to say too, I'm super happy to see that Director Bentnell is here. I think you're still here. A lot of what I know about this, I've learned from her. Hi, Sarah. And some of what I'm going to share tonight came directly from her. And if you've been following the funding stuff, and if you were at the last school board meeting, our school board is leading in the way, I feel like, in our state, and really clarifying what some of these larger issues are and reaching out to legislators. Sarah has written, and the board has, I think, adopted, yes, a letter. So from the Shoreline School Board to our legislators about some kind of what these key issues are, some of the things that Jennifer talked about, what's important to schools. Some of the big things are like, one of the reasons our budget is so threatened right now is because the legislature likes to pass requirements, legal things that the school has to do, mandates, but not fund them. So this, that starts eating away at all those resources. And they're just, I felt really proud at the board meeting, hearing that legislative update given and hearing about the work that our board is doing to further those ideas at the state. I felt really proud of our district for being a voice in that work. PTA resources, let's see, screen share. I started making slides for this, and it was going to be a lot of messy slides, so I'm hoping this will let me click through. No, maybe it won't. I haven't done a live screen share before, but I'm hoping I can just walk you through some internet resources here. Let me see if I can figure out how to do that. Here we go. Is that working? Can you all see it? Yeah, okay, good. I can barely see it with all the tools on top of it, but okay. WashingtonStatePTA.org. And if you just Google Washington State PTA, this will come up. If you go on there, there's this focus areas tab and advocacy. And if you click on advocacy, there we go. This is huge. Right here, you can subscribe for action alerts. And then when there is a need to speak out on a bill, so the bills go through a lengthy process. They go through a series of committees in the House, and then assuming they make it through all the committees, and they'll get changes along the way. If you took the time to look at the draft of that one bill in the member packet or the original bill, it already has lots of things crossed out and new wording written in, and that will happen more and more as it works its way through the process and gets debated on the floor and voted on. And then assuming it passes the House, it goes to our state Senate and goes through the same process again of a bunch of committees and revisions. And then if the Senate passes it and the House and the Senate bill have differences, then it goes through a reconciliation process to finally get to a bill that can go to the governor. So all along those ways, there are opportunities to address like some of the concerns Jennifer brought up about what does that really mean to fully fund it? What's it actually going to do? As those things get talked about, there might be opportunities where it's helpful for people to speak out and share stories. You can also reach out to your legislators and share stories anytime, but those action alerts are going to tell you kind of the pressing urgent stuff. Here's a thing that's happening and we need voices. So that's a really good thing to subscribe to. And then right beneath it, this bill status reports. Well, there's a couple things here. And there's also, so Marie Sullivan is our lobbyist, and she does these reports that have that kind of, she updates it weekly with what's going on with bills that we're tracking in the legislature. And I think that bill status tab goes to the same place. But this document is huge, but it's got upcoming events. So these are kind of bills that are in process, talking about where they are, what's happening with them. And then as you scroll down to that, it breaks it down by topic that are aligned with the state PTA priorities, right? So addressing student mental health crisis, bills that relate to that, gaps in education funding, as a lot of what we're talking about tonight. There's a whole section on special education funding, inclusion and resources. And, you know, as far as kind of picturing how all this works together, this is what happens when special education funding gets put into Washington State PTA's top priorities. Then it becomes this focus area. Oh, we got kiddos in the background. Then it becomes this focus area that's prioritized, that's put in these resources that our lobbyists and we as advocates are getting information on and can really focus on supporting. So that's where you can go to find out about all the bills going on. Then what do you do with that? So then, I can't see my tabs because the Zoom tools are in the way. Hang on. Let's see here. No, that didn't work. Well, I'm just gonna Google. So if you just Google Washington State Legislature, I think it's leg.wa.gov, but I'm not sure. Yeah, leg.wa.gov. So if you go there, oops, why did it not go there? Try again. There we go. First of all, you need to know who your representatives are and who you should be reaching out to, right? So if you go here under the legislature home to find your district, there is a really nice tool there where you can stick in your address and it will bring up who your legislators are. Are we still recording? Is the whole world going to have my address now? All right. But there, see, I can see who my representatives are, and I can click through and get their contact info. If you want to know what's happening with a particular bill, you can go to bill information. You can put in like the 1436 is the bill we were talking about earlier, and you can see where it is in the process. You can get the, here's where I got the text of that original bill. You can find out who sponsored it. And then you can go in and comment. And well, if you have better internet than me, you can go in and comment. But Zoom takes a lot of bandwidth. There we go. So you can put in whether you support or oppose or neutral and put comments about it. So that's one way you can take a stance. Another thing you can do is the PTA, and would love to have volunteers to do this if you're interested. PTA has advocacy days where we all sort of, where a date is picked or a range of dates is picked, and we all collectively reach out to our representatives and try to make appointments and sit and get members to come and sit and have a conversation with them about our priorities. Jessica Mercer put that together last year, and we had a great conversation with one of Senator Solomon's representatives. And that is a valuable way to advocate. We do need a volunteer who's willing to kind of make those contacts and set up those appointments. If that is something someone is interested in and would want to put together, we could certainly help with the tools for that and help get the word out and find members to come participate in the conversation. But I would love a volunteer to do that. If you're interested, let us know. Our email contacts are all on the website. But that's kind of just in a nutshell where you can go. Washington State PTA and leg.wa.gov are where you can go to kind of find out what's going on that affects us and what PTA is doing about it, and then to get information on how to reach out to your representatives. That's really also, I'm going to throw one more thing out. Director Bentnell's letter. I think it's going to be, Sarah, you can chime in. It's going to be on the, right now you can find it in the agenda from the board meeting, from the last board meeting, but it's going to go on the board member page. Yes, Sarah?
That's my understanding. Yeah, we just sent it to the legislators today. And I was actually looking at, could I attach it in the comments, but I couldn't figure out how to do that. So it's a PDF. But it is the intent that that'll get shared. And exactly like you said, Ananda, it has been, it's in the board meeting materials from Tuesday.
Which if you just Google Shoreline School District School Board, you go to the school board page and then there's agenda and minutes, you click on that. And it was the 24th. If you click on the agenda for that, it's a big old agenda. It's page 116. But that's where you can find it.
Oh, that's excellent. I don't even know what page it's on.
I had to print it to a PDF, so I had to tell it what page numbers I needed. So there you go. And with that, I think we can open it up to questions. If you want to put those in the chat. I've been talking, so I haven't been looking at the chat.
Nanda, while people put questions in, can I offer one additional way to engage in advocacy that's along the lines of the comment that you shared?
Love that. Thank you.
So first of all, thank you for your leadership and all of you in your leadership on advocacy, and both with the board and with the legislature. Just thank you for, I mean, you're advocates for your children on the daily. And I know that that's like where we start as families of students who receive special education services. So I just want to acknowledge that. When you go to the legislature website, if you're on a bill page and you say comment on this bill, those comments will only go to the bill sponsors, which may or may not impact the bill moving out of committee. As bills are being heard in committee, there's a way to log your position on a bill or testify for a bill or submit written testimony on a bill. And that's through a page called Participating in the Process. And it takes you to like a committee sign-in page where you can just submit your position without having to testify. It takes 2 minutes. So you can, and I think there's links
Sarah,
on that
if I bring-
URL that I shared.
I was gonna say, if I bring up that leg.wa page again, can you walk us through it, where it is?
Sure, yeah, absolutely, bring it up. Let's do this, I love this stuff, this is my jam.
Oh, wait.
So I would say, I would encourage folks to, it's to get in there and actually read. The bills are written so they're readable, right? So don't go ahead and open them up. And there's a couple others in there around special education that aren't about funding that
Mhm.
really should be read by families of students with disabilities and should have a voice and a say in what's happening in the bills. The funding one's super important, but there's also a couple other ones in special ed. So if you get a chance to kind of play around in here, I would encourage you to go look at the other bills also and take a read. They're readable. You can read them
Yeah.
and you will understand as a special education parent what they mean to you as an individual and for your kids.
I'm so glad you said that, Trish, because they've really improved how they're readable.
Mhm.
And you will understand it
Yep.
really deeply, and so definitely always read it first. So I didn't mean to say just log on bills without reading.
Oh,
Definitely
no, I
read-
did.
read the bill.
I wasn't saying that, Sarah. I was just,
Yeah.
I was in here the other day reading through a lot of things and I'm like, I was impressed with how the bills are now. They used to be really kind of clunky and felt like lawyer speak and hard
Yeah,
common person to really, the common person being me, to understand kind of what are they saying and what does this mean? And so there's some bills in here that there's some on isolation restraint,
yeah.
there's just special education process. So those are important to look at as well. But I know we're talking about funding right now, which is super duper hugely important because you guys saw that federal, state, local levy dollar amount, right?
Mhm.
We're funded. And I mean, I am saying we will serve students in their IEPs based on what their IEPs say. We will do that. We are mandated to, and we will make that happen. That's my job and the job of the team and the teachers and all of that to make sure that happens. But to be able to do that well without, we need to be fully funded.
Well, and you all saw what the budget numbers look like. The 8.5 million over what special education costs that is being paid out of our local funds would be a huge difference in our budget. And that kind of gets to Jennifer's point about what does that bill really mean about what does fully funded really mean and how are they going to do that and what are those numbers going to be based on, which is where our participation in the process becomes really, really important, that we're watching those things and advocating for those things along the way. And yeah, there's so many bills. There were a whole bunch I wanted to highlight, but there are a couple others I did highlight, but I tried to limit it to funding because that was the topic of the meeting, but there is a lot. Sarah.
Well, and I'm glad that Trish brought that up because and I wasn't intending to say this only about funding bills. I just want to make sure people have the tools to participate in the process. And you should participate in the way that feels right for you. What I will say is, as you look at those bills, any bill, something I've noticed in PTA, like calls to action versus like the WASDA or WASA or WASBO, these are all the alphabet soup of all the different education agencies around the state, is that the PTA calls to action won't always identify if something is an unfunded mandate. Meaning there might be a call to action to support a bill that will, in policy, support a certain thing. But that bill has no funding attached. And so the policy, the intent of the bill may be something that folks align with, but it may become one more thing that districts have to do without any additional funding from the state. So one thing I will encourage, like to build on what Trish said, one thing I will encourage you to do is when you look at those bills, be keenly aware of, like, do they say the Washington State Legislature will appropriate funds for the purpose of, or like, will they be saying things about like, we're gonna fund it, or will they say like, we think you should do it and you should pass a policy about this, And almost anything that we pass a policy about has some kind of funding has some, like a human will probably have to do that thing. Or there will be some resources who will have to do that thing. And maybe they're saying like, this will become some part of somebody's job. There's nobody in the district who has space in their job for another responsibility. So Hannah, like, yes. So that's just something I'd love to like elevate to your advocacy awareness, is like often, and I'll just share, like, this is the position that WAS is taking on some bills, this is the position that our school board is taking on some bills, is we're logging in as others saying, we totally agree with this in policy, but we can't fully support it unless you fund it. So just to give you a sense of like, and I'm not telling you how to advocate, I'm not telling you what you should say, I'm just saying what we are saying. And I'm saying this very carefully because we are legally not allowed to like tell you which way you should go on things. You should make that decision on your own. Okay, on this page, so after you've like heard about a bill, you're like, oh, I heard about this bill, sounds great. You went and you looked at that bill by doing the bill lookup on the left with bill information.
Here?
And then you put in the number and you're like,
Should I go here?
sure, go to bill information on the left. You put in some number, you're like, I heard about 1436, sounds great. And you go find it, and you're like, ooh, funding special education, sounds like something I'm interested in. You come down and you see that original bill under available documents. You open it up and you read to your heart's content. Here's a cool thing to see in this. This is helpful. Actually, come back up to the top.
Okay.
Here's a way to make it easier to read these bills. There will either be new section. So right here, right, they've got a section right at the top saying being enacted, new section. Anything that's new sections, like this doesn't already exist in Washington state law. They are saying we are gonna put in something new. Everything in new section is on the table. It's all new. Scroll down a little bit. And then you will get sometimes to sections that say something like section 2, RCW, such and such and such. When it says something like this, they're saying, hey, there's an existing section in the revised code of Washington, which is what RCW stands for. And we want to amend it to the following. In this section, you're looking for strike throughs and underlines. So in this section, you're looking for like, oh, I got to page 3. Oh, I see they're striking through that 1.5. And they're now saying they want to amend it to say that the multiplier will be the rate of, and then they put in this information. So you're either looking at new sections or revisions. And in the revisions, you'll be able to tell it really clearly because it's strike throughs and underlines. Okay, so once you've read it, you use your back button or you open up, like me, 10 million new tabs and head on back up to the top. You're like, I'm ready to take a position on this. Use the Washington State logo or title to go back home in the top left corner or legislature home. And from here on the right hand side, there's a column that says let your voice be heard. That second button, participating in the process. Oh, I know I missed a step, which is on that bill page. You don't have to go back, but on that bill page, you saw like, oh, and it's going to be heard in committee next week or tomorrow. So you know it's going to be heard in committee. So you go participating in the process.
And you could also know that it was going to be heard in committee if you were signed up for action alerts from the state.
Yes, very good, very good.
Or if you were following that link on the Washington State PTA page where it had all the bill information and the top was action, like where things were happening. So those
Cool.
are two other ways you could.
Yeah, good. So you click participating in the process, and right here on the right hand side, participating in a committee hearing. Insider tip. All 3 of these links go the same exact place. Click any one of them. I just randomly choose when I come to this page. And they all come to the committee sign-in page. The 1436 is a House bill. It starts with HB. It's a House bill. So you would go to House. I happen to know it's going to be heard in appropriations, not education, although it's not scheduled yet. But let's just pretend. So let's go ahead. You select your committee first. So you select appropriations on the once you select the committee on the right, the dates that this committee are meeting will pop up. Choose the one that is the hearing that you're gonna, it doesn't, you can choose whichever one, because I don't think this bill is actually in either of those hearings yet. So you choose the date and time of the hearing. Down below, a list of what bills are being heard in that hearing will appear. Let's pretend that state employment is the one we're talking about. You click the bill that you are interested in having a say in. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? Let's go up. 126 was today, and you can't see all the options. In the meetings drop down in the top right, select the meeting for 1:30. All the way in the top drop down. Yeah,
that makes sense. Because that date has passed.
I set us up for a, yeah. So, because you see something different if the hearing has already passed. Okay. So let's imagine that we're gonna sign in on extreme weather events. So you click that, and once you click a bill that is the bill that you want to, you have options down below. You can sign up to testify in person, meaning in Olympia, testify remotely via Zoom. They've got the system real slick. It's awesome. I would like my position noted for the record. This is where you say, like, I'm pro, I'm con, boom, done in 2 minutes. Another awesome tip, right now, you've now come to like the sign in page for this specific bill in this specific hearing. Oh yeah, go back. Oh,
sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, go ahead and go back to that.
Okay.
Good. You can copy this URL and share this around, and this one will take people straight to this sign in screen. That is a very easy way to propagate your advocacy. So from here, just make sure they're really clear on like, what is your encouragement? Are you encouraging pro or con or whatnot? The bill titles are not always obvious. I learned why that is this week.
We're all about extreme weather events. That's what we're
right. This can be about anything, right? I'm not actually pro extreme weather events, but maybe I'm actually pro what this bill says. What I learned is that once a bill is entered, they can amend all the text of the bill, but they can't change the title of the bill. So that's why bills often have these like incredibly general, unhelpful titles. I'm like, oh, feels like a systemic barrier, but okay.
I kind of like extreme weather events.
I know. So then here you can select your position. You just go down the screen, right? You select your position on what you want it to be noted. Enter your information. You should know about how you work with organization, whether you can actually say you're with an organization or not. Check if you want to sign in as an organization, you should check with that organization and see, am I allowed to say that I'm with this organization? And then, you fill it in. At the bottom, you say you're not a robot, submit registration, and you're done. At the end of the hearing of every bill, after they've gone through everybody who's testified, they read out how many people have signed in on the bill, but not to testify, and how many people have signed it, and they say like 1,000 signed in pro, and 800 signed in con, and 5 signed in other. So those get read into the official record. And so it's helpful to show where the public sits in support or opposition to a certain bill. I find that signing in other here, personally, this is like just my personal feeling. This is like, that doesn't tell them anything. It's just other, like, what am I supposed to do with that? So I find that if I'm going to go other, I go back and on that sign in page, instead of doing position note of record, I do a written testimony and say, I'm signing in other on this, and here's why. And nobody's like grading your written testimony. Like, it can be whatever. And it uses that same form. You get to say your position, who you are, and then they give a little field where you can put in your written testimony. That was a lot more than I intended to share with you, but I hope that it's helpful. And there is a little video tutorial on that page that we link to that's on the website, on the Shoreline website.
Oh, okay.
That talks you right through this process also.
The state PTO website, you mean?
No, I put a URL in the chat.
Oh, great.
And there's a page that the board and the district have put together on how to participate in the process. And on that page, there's a little video tutorial that talks through this whole thing I just talked you through.
I would bring that up if I could figure out how to
That's
get
really
that
okay. I
while
think we
sharing.
should totally get to people's questions. That's more important.
Yes.
Thanks.
Right.
So Nanda, I see a couple of questions here, but I think one of them is, I definitely think we should hopefully get an explanation about the 13.5 cap as well as the multiplier. And then we do have one other question.
So I think Jennifer and I can try to explain a little bit about that cap. So that cap is like that percentage of students that receive special education services in the district. We are around 11 point a little bit, which is a nice number. The cap then is that a 13.5. So that's then that difference is how when they move that cap is how they determine what the funding will be. That because we know the state and the federal government know that our students with disabilities require more dollars than a general education student. I'm going to make up silly numbers. Let's say that for every student that comes to the Shoreline School District, the state, and Jennifer might know this maybe, receives $10,000 from the state. Let's just say for every student, and that, remember when she was talking about every 400 students is like $1 million. That's kind of how they fund us. They give us money to do education. So the multiplier that cap then helps to determine how they're going to fund us with state and federal state dollars. I believe it's just state dollars, right, Jennifer?
Yes.
Just state dollars. Any percentage over that cap number would then give us more dollars. So we're at 11.9, and that cap being like 13.5 would mean that does not make a difference for us in receiving more dollars for our special education students. The multiplier is how they determine how many dollars per student is that we receive per student. So you're kind of like one student receives $10,000 from the state. They utilize that multiplier to determine then what dollar amount would be given to the district for each student that receives special education services. How did I do, Jennifer?
Beautifully.
Okay. Because yeah, it's, we try in special ed, we try to make everything as complicated as possible because that's what we like to do. But Ananda, you had your hand up.
Is the multiplier based on what the basic fund is for students? So if it's like 1.5, does that mean you get half as much again as what what is it multiplying? 1.5 of what?
I'm not I need to look at it again. It's been a while since I looked at the multiplier because it's not destined to assist us quite yet. So I can get back with you on that.
No problem. Basically, both of these, though, just to really simplify it, are workarounds that our state has to try to deal with the fact that we're not fully funding special education. I mean, they're just.
Yes. Yeah. So the cap and the multiplier are ways that can support if the numbers work but they really, the fully funding of special education is the way that's going to support Shoreline schools. Other districts might benefit from the cap and the multiplier looking differently, but in Shoreline, we need to be fully funded.
And cap is basically the state of Washington has said you're only supposed to have a certain number of students with disabilities based on, percentage in your community. So if you have more than that, we're not giving you money for them. So we're under the cap. So removing the cap doesn't help us. But it's sort of an absurd concept when the federal law requires all students with disabilities needs to be met. And I'm pretty sure we're the only state that has it. So it's been an odd thing out there for a long time that even though it doesn't affect us directly, I feel like it sends a message about the value of our students and about how we think about how our students are funded. And so I think, it's definitely something we want gone. It will help other districts in the state and it shifts the thinking in a positive way. And something I learned from Dr. Betnal is that we have, in terms of when legislature, so this is another reason it's super important for all of you, to whatever degree you have bandwidth to do it, get involved if you can, because our representatives want to represent us. So they want to know what's important to us. And then those are the things that get priority in Olympia. And for a lot of years, education was at the top of that list. That's what everyone was telling them they cared about. Right now, it's kind of at the bottom of that list. It's not what they're hearing people care about. So they really need to hear from us that we care about it.
So there's a complex question here that Rebecca asked about. She said, I'm going to read it because that's the way it's going to help me see if I can explain or get to an answer. Am I understanding correctly that if the special ed funding bill currently going through the House was passed, that's the one that we're talking about? Because there's a handful of bills that are going forward that have to do with special ed funding. This is the one that OSPI is sponsored and will do the most to fully fund. So let's just say that there's other bills in there that you could take a look at. Director Betnal kind of went through how to look at those, but there's other ones in there too. But this is the one that really does kind of the cap and multiplier and all that. And they're just saying this would fully fund. And that our local levy would no longer be able to provide the 8 million and it currently provides, and that this is to make sure that all school districts are equally funded, but not necessarily adequately funded. So I'm not sure what that would do about how, because remember when Jennifer was talking about that fully funding and what that really means is a question, right? Because the state gives us 0.6 school psychologists. So what is that? What does fully funding really mean at the state level? And will there be more needs, or how will the state determine what fully funding really means? And I don't have the answer to that.
Right.
We know that, like, for example, when we increase the IPD, like Jennifer used the example of an administrator salary that OSPI says is 120. And we know that that's not an administrator salary in Shoreline, but then that is what the state then would look at. Is that what they're going to see as fully funding? So let's say they're going to fully fund a teacher. They set kind of a salary base, but our salary base is higher. So it's all kind of a numbers game, and I don't understand exactly. I don't think the bill actually outlines that. And I don't know that bills do outline exactly to that level of detail what all that fully funding really means and how that would be implemented. So how's that for a very slightly confusing answer to a very difficult question? Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, your question is, would levy funds be prohibited? Then would we not be able to use levy funds for to make up the difference in the special education needs? Well, we are going to need to meet the needs of our individual students with IEPs. So we were going to need to do that. So I can't imagine. I don't know. I can't imagine that we would have restrictions on levy dollars towards special education. Jennifer, do you have any thoughts on that?
Lots of them, there's really no good definition of what constitutes basic education in Washington State. So there is a definition of what enhancement levies pay for. And so it will be threading a needle. However, they might decide to fund this, because they aren't likely to go beyond what they apparently feel is fully funding basic education. With special education, maybe they are going to enhance the model in some way to recognize that paraeducators are needed, that there are students that have specific professional needs to support them, and that those types of positions would be funded to a certain level. It will not, in any circumstances, likely cover the entire full Shoreline salary and benefits and staffing model, because I just think that expense will probably be too much of a hurdle for the legislature. I can be super hopeful that they're willing to make that investment because it's long overdue. but it with no basic education definition, it's hard for me to figure out how they'll implement this.
The one question, and this might have already been answered.
Can I just jump in really
Yeah.
quick, super fast on this? I brought the screen back up because it does talk a little bit in here. There's nothing in that bill that I saw, although again, I always encourage everyone to read that bill fully, but there's nothing in I saw that limits funding anywhere else. But it's not, it says the legislator directs the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction to create a new funding system to address funding gaps. So it's sort of preserving existing models, removing the cap, and directing OSPI to come up with another bucket, essentially to cover the gap. So a lot of the underlying question there, I think the answer is we don't know. The bill doesn't say, right? So I'll stop sharing that. Yes, Kirsten,
yeah, so-
next question.
Yep. So this question says, our most recent approved levy specifically designates a majority of the funds for special education. Will those funds continue to be allocated to special education as we head into likely large budget cuts?
Well, we are legally mandated to meet the needs of our students with disabilities. So we're going to need to, if right now, when we saw that little, it wasn't a pie chart. In my mind, it's a pie chart. We saw what we get federal, we saw what we got state, we saw what filled the gap with levy dollars. So we may be looking into special education to see, what are some of the things that we have that maybe we're spending that aren't going directly to students, and maybe we need to look at that a bit, but we need to meet the needs of those individual IEPs. So well,
let's remember that every one of our students is a basic education student first.
Yeah.
And if we step back a moment and we look at that, there is no doubt every student in Shoreline system will see or feel budget reductions ahead of us.
yes.
Not just because we have maintenance of effort requirements, but because we believe in special education for our students, we are going to continue to do what we need to do to take care of the needs of those kids. That does not mean that there won't be other things felt. The dollars may still be there. They may not grow in these coming years. And as we know, things continue to cost more. So they may grow in very small ways, so that we make sure that we are meeting the minimum requirements. And then if we have students who just are going to require services that come into our system that cost more, we will figure out how to be compliant with the law. There's no doubt that we are committed to that. But system-wide, every student will feel changes in Shoreline as we ensure that we are taking care of our current budget constraint.
Thanks, Jennifer. That's a really important thing to think through, is that, our students are general education students first, and they are in our general education classrooms, they are in our schools. And as the budget constraints come on board, that they will impact all of our kids in some way.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, I don't see any other questions in the chat. So I will turn it over to Ananda.
Well, thank you so much, Trish and Jennifer and Sarah. So I really appreciate you taking the time to present and to chime in and help us out with all this great information. And to thank all of you, I thank you, all of you, our membership, for voting to support that bill. and for taking the time to be here and learn about this work. And if anyone would like to volunteer to help with putting together a listening session, please get in touch with us. And we'll see you at our next member meeting in March. If anybody wants to hang around for a caregiver check-in afterward, please feel free to do that. We'll just hang out here for a little bit.